Thank you, Mr President. I would like to ask the Treasury Minister whether additional funding will be made available to the island's hoteliers, and if so, when will this be made available?
On the Treasury Minister, Honourable Member Mr Cannon.
Mr President, tourist accommodation providers have been able to access 3 financial support schemes introduced by the Treasury and the Department for Enterprise: the Coronavirus Business Support Scheme, the Strategic Capacity Scheme and the Salary Support Scheme. To date, across these 3 schemes, £4.14 million has been paid to businesses and self-employed persons operating tourist accommodation. As members will be aware, one of the main pillars of support, the Salary Support Scheme, has already been extended for a further period of 3 months with the support of this Honourable Court. It is apparent that a number of sectors, including tourist accommodation, will continue to feel the financial effects of the pandemic for some time to come, given the impact that this has had on the traditional visitor season, and the Department for Enterprise is working hard in conjunction with Treasury in considering further options for support into the medium term. Whilst a broad approach to support schemes was necessary at the outset of the pandemic, the focus going forward will be on more targeted support to those sectors which continue to be adversely impacted beyond the period covered by the initial schemes. The Department for Enterprise and the Treasury realise that bringing forward the next phase of potential support as quickly as possible is crucially important. However, it is equally important that any measures are considered strategically and provide a fair and equitable solution across all sectors which continue to be negatively impacted. I will provide a full and further update in July Tynwald as part of the budget update in respect of our economic recovery plans.
Supplementary, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr President. Thank you, Minister, for that encouraging answer. In terms of the action that's possible in this area, do you see that the hoteliers will potentially benefit from the recovery plan that the Minister for Enterprise has mentioned previously?
Treasury Minister to reply.
Well, I don't want to preempt what will be in that plan until I've had a chance to fully explain that and present that to Tynwald and the public, Mr President. But suffice to say, I do want to give honourable members reassurance that we recognise that this is a complex situation, that there is a significant economic challenge in front of us. And as I outlined in my answer, we have to ask ourselves a number of critical questions about what further support should be issued to who and by what means. We are currently working through that process. I would suffice to say both the Department for Enterprise and Treasury have been heavily engaged in working and consulting with the private sector on this, discussing matters politically and at officer level. We are substantially along the road of developing this economic plan, which will really focus on the short to medium term and longer term measures that are needed to support our economy going forward. And it is fair to say that the visitor economy is one of those areas where we're paying very close attention to in terms of what is needed to support the businesses in that industry, certainly for the short to medium term, or until such point as we can get our borders fully open and resume our visitor economy.
Supplementary question, Mrs Barber, Honourable Member for Douglas East.
Thank you, Mr President. Would the Minister agree that the hotel businesses have not in fact just been impacted by COVID-19, but also by the Flybe demise, also by 70% of them being on the promenade? There has already been a lot of work going in here, but the staycation market simply is not going to fill the gap that has been left. And so it's a bigger picture than just this last 2 months. And would he take that on board in those deliberations?
Treasury Minister.
I think there is, thank you, Mr President. I think there's a lot to take on board in answer to the honourable member's questions, and indeed I was engaged in a fairly lively discussion with her colleague and my good friend Mr Robertshaw, the other honourable member for Douglas East, about the need to develop a bright and relevant future vision for the sector, for the visitor economy moving forward. Now is the opportunity, I would suggest, to grasp the nettle and look to the future, not just for the visitor economy, but in a number of areas in our broader economy, to develop a dynamic, I would suggest, future vision, and to try and work towards that vision. And of course, in recognising, of course, that within our economy and within the visitor economy, there were a number of weaknesses even before the pandemic. And some of those were being brought very much to the fore as a result of the changes in the airline industry, collapse of the airline industry. So there's a lot to think about and a lot to work on over the next few months. And clearly that responsibility doesn't just fall to Treasury, but must be embraced both by the sector itself and, of course, those engaged in government in interacting between the Treasury and, of course, the sector itself.
I'll allow a final supplementary. Mrs Barber.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank the Minister for his response. Would he also consider the difficulty that's been faced by a number of hotels on the island in seeking to repay the deposits and prepaid bookings that they've had, where they've either had to take personal loans out to cover that, or alternatively push the bookings forward to the next year, creating a void that's going to happen in the next season that will prevent them from bringing additional money in. So this is a far-reaching consequence, and depending on the way that different hotels have managed it will depend on the point in time where their money pot falls apart, essentially. These people are really struggling and need absolutely the fullest of attention. Would he agree with me?
Mr Cannon.
Thank you, Mr President. I absolutely agree that the challenges facing those connected with the visitor economy in particular are substantial. I do not shy away from the fact that those businesses, those people and individuals involved with those businesses have a huge amount on their plate at the moment, not least the cash attrition that has been eating away at their businesses over the last period of time, the fact that they will be concerned that they can see some of these support measures coming to an end, and of course the fact that they've also got to face up to a forthcoming autumn and winter season where traditionally their bed take-up, the use of their accommodation can be traditionally at a low point. So there is a lot to think about. What I will give reassurance is that the Department for Enterprise and Treasury are very aware of these challenges, are trying to work in as quickly but as calm a manner as possible to recognise those challenges, understand what we need to do, and to apply that consistently in a manner that is consistent and fair to everybody involved in that sector. But I do not underestimate for one moment that this will be a difficult period for many of those businesses, and our job will be to try and see them through that and help them build towards a new and brighter future.